now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. It's Children's Book Week, and my next guest is an award-winning author of the wildly successful Judy Moody and Stink series for kids. Here to discuss her work, as well as the importance of great storytelling, literacy, and how to improve or inspire, rather, your kids to read. Please welcome Megan McDonald. She joins us from California. Megan, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, I was reading a lot about you. I went through a pile of interviews you've done over the years. I was surprised to learn your father, he did not finish the 8th grade, but he was an amazing storyteller, a voracious one. Was that really the beginning for you as a storyteller, your father spinning tales around the dinner table?
That was a really big early influence for me. My dad was a bridge builder, and his father had died, so when he was 14 years old, he had to go, he was the water boy that carried water to the workers on the bridges in Pittsburgh, where I grew up. And he became an iron worker. Iron workers all get their own nickname, like Big Red or Pork Chop Smitty. And my dad's nickname was Little Johnny the Storyteller. So from even an early age, he was known for just spinning a tale about his own life. And when we were kids, I grew up with 4 older sisters, and we would wait for Dad to get home back when they still had family meals around the dinner table. My mom would always wait, and the whole family would gather, and my dad would tell us stories. And many of the stories were about his own childhood and growing up. So that was a really early influence and inspiration for me.
Yeah. You know, Megan, I always tell people, obviously fiction is important, I think, to all of our lives. It teaches empathy, it teaches us to understand the world and events and people we'll never meet. But it's so important, I think, for families to share their own stories. And in some ways, it's a beautiful way to impart lessons rather than, you know, thou shalt not or thou shalt. To impart the failures or successes in your own life and how you got there, sometimes that leaves a much deeper influence on a child, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. This is something I talk with kids about all the time, because kids say, well, I want to be a writer, but I don't have anything to write about. And it's so simple. Just turn to your own life. Every kid has a story about a sibling or a pet or a funny thing that happened to them on the way to school or on the bus or at school. So I really try to encourage kids just to turn to their own lives to mine that first story. And you know, people always say to me, but how do you remember all these stories from your life? Or how do you remember when you were 8 years old? And I like to quote Mark Twain, who says, I remember everything, whether it happened or not. So.
I agree, Megan. This is the story of my life, my writing life. That's not a bad one. Megan, what I love, you just mentioned it. In the Judy Moody stories, how much did you mine your own story and the relationships you observed and experienced between your sisters and yourself?
Well, it's interesting, you know, the original impetus for Judy Moody really came from growing up with so many sisters. And one day I just thought, you know, so many funny things happened with us. I really should write some of these stories down. And I didn't really have a plan for the book. I just started trying to write down some of these episodes and some of the capture some of the funny antics among siblings. And I had maybe 18 or 20 of these different little vignettes, and I didn't really know what to do with them. And my editor, Mary Lee Donovan, who was the one who said, maybe if you found a connecting thread, you could make them into a short novel. So my connection to coming up with Judy was really from telling stories of my own childhood growing up with sisters initially. So that first book, I would say, contains the most stories that are really from my own life. And after book 1, Judy sort of took on a character of her own, and you know, I kept going. But I would say in every book, of course, there's something of me and my sisters in each of the Judy Moody books.
I was surprised to learn you stuttered for a while because you had such a a kind of vocal sibling group. You couldn't get a word in edgewise. And your mother gave you a notebook at a young age and said, here, write your thoughts down. You write your ideas down. Did that help you break through? I know there was that one first writing project that sort of you found your voice in.
Exactly. Well, my mom, I don't actually really remember the stuttering, but my sisters all remember, and my mom had told me about it, and they attribute it to, you know, we were all around the dinner table and my sisters would all be talking away, telling about their day. And like you mentioned, I couldn't really get a word in edgewise. So my mom would bang the spoon on a glass and say, now it's time for Megan to speak. Well, as soon as the spotlight was on me, I couldn't think of anything to say and I started to stutter. And my mom, it was so smart of her, instead of getting a book about stuttering, she went to the bookshop and talked with the bookseller, and the person recommended Harriet the Spy.
Oh,
and my mother brought home the book Harriet the Spy with a little spiral notebook. Well, Harriet, of course, was a reporter, and she would go around and sort of spy on her friends and eavesdrop and write things down. And this notebook was where I first started writing things down and observing the world around me. And so that led to, I think, being really comfortable with beginning to write down your thoughts and find your own voice that way.
You know, I love that story, Megan, because our tagline for Storented, which is this literacy initiative, is find your story, find your way. And Harriet the Spy really was your story in many ways.
Exactly. I mean, she was kind of a precursor of Judy Moody in a way, because she was feisty and she really had a mind of her own. And, you know, Judy is so creative. She's passionate about so many things, and she can kind of zing off in a way. And Harriet really found her focus through writing about it. It often got her in trouble with her friends, too, as often happens with Judy as well.
Yeah. Megan, I was two things I want to ask you about before I get to some of the questions from your fans that we received emails about. I noticed you were raised Catholic. You went to Catholic schools. Did that shape the approach to the Judy Moody series, or your understanding of the relationships at all in the books?
Well, I think it did, in the sense that growing up Catholic, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and there was a smallness to it and a personalness to that kind of education, as well as getting a really strong foundation in reading and writing and all of the basics. But I think it also just really shaped who I am and shaped me as a person. And of course, all of that goes into the writing of Judy Moody and Stink. You were the spokesman this year for the American Association of School Librarians, these heroic, largely women, we have to say it. I've been touring the country and meeting so many of these beautiful, really heroines in many ways. I mean, they expend their own time, their own money to draw kids to a love of reading. Are you surprised that there is a decline in children making use of libraries and the access to libraries? Well, I think, you know, I'm a librarian myself, actually, by background. I went to library school in the 80s. And I remember back in the mid-80s, a huge discussion about, will technology replace the book? Will there be a day when we don't read a physical book anymore? And I remember just being horrified or terrified at that thought. And I thought, what are they talking about? And I think we're closer now that technology is so much more a part of our lives. But I think many of us who are readers, especially children, still really want that tactile experience of the book. You know, you see a child go into a library, and when they find the right book or a book that excites them, they hug the book and they, you know, smell the book and take it with them everywhere. And that book means, it's like a friend. You know, E.B. White said, books are good company. This is like a friend that we're choosing to spend time with. So my hope is that I mean, part of being the spokesperson for school libraries is I feel like it's so important to keep those school libraries alive. And I know we really struggle with funding for libraries, but for some kids, that's the only access to books they have. So for me, I feel like that's really important for kids the world over, but also because of how the school library had such an important role in shaping me and having me become a writer. I mean, my librarian, Sister Robertine, she got to know me personally, and she knew to give me Laura Ingalls Wilder and Ramona and, you know, all of those early books that set me on a path and really made me the writer that I am today.
No, well, no, and it shows through, and it's so important, I think, just to give kids the option and the freedom to sort of go through the stacks and find their story. It's just, I can't say enough about it, so I'll get off my soapbox, but I think you're 100% right. Two questions now from your fans, so I want to get to these because they'll kill me if I don't. Jenny in Nebraska writes, and she asks, how much of you is in Judy Moody? Is it based on your life? We talked a little bit about it, but Judy herself, is it based on you, Megan?
Well, I think if she watches this program, she'll see from the messy hair and that there are many elements of Judy in me and of me and Judy. I didn't consciously sit down to make Judy like me, but of course, so much of me is in that character. And what I love about Judy is, I mean, we share a lot of things. We both have a lot of moods, good and bad moods, and the messy hair and a lot of creative endeavors.
Right.
But Judy is somebody that I really wanted to show the ups and the downs, the good and the bad, not just somebody who's perfect all the time, but I really wanted to show that it's okay to have disappointments. We all do, and to have those days where we're just in a mood. And I think that's a way, without me consciously realizing, kids have connected so much with that because Judy feels like a real person to them, like a friend, somebody that they want to sit next to in class or go to the swimming pool with or be friends with. And so that was kind of a roundabout way. But yes, I think at the core, Judy and I are a lot alike. But I also, because I can make her up in my imagination, I can have her be better at things than me, like speaking up for herself and those kinds of things, than I was perhaps at that age.
You know, it's a fun series, and it does touch on so many, both highs and lows of that, you know, middle grade experience, and you capture it with such fun and alarm. This other fan, Rob, writes, now this is a boy, he said, I read that you had no brother. Where did Stink come from? Your fan.
That's a great question, Rob. Well, I always wanted a brother. I was the youngest of 5, so I never had anybody younger than me, but I thought it would be so fun to have a little brother because we were a family of all girls. So part of it was wishful thinking, but the other part is when I write, because I write fiction, I'm inspired by my own life and my own childhood, but I also don't want to be limited by sticking too close to what really happened. So I try to find the truth in fiction, but also make it out of the world of imagination. So by changing a sister to a little brother and making him have his own personality of kind of that classic pesty little brother that wants to follow you everywhere and wants to play with your friends and do what you're doing. It allowed me to take a leap of imagination away from what I knew, which was just growing up with sisters. So Judy actually became more like real life, the older sister, but I connect with Stink and relate to him because of being the youngest in the family.
No, he's certainly a lively character unto himself. I ask every author on the show, Megan, a series of story-oriented questions. Now, one of them I think we already covered, which is, what is the story that's shaped you on your path? And it's probably Harriet the Spy, right?
Yes, yes, I would have to say Harriet the Spy. Yeah.
Okay, now these are rapid fire questions. Where do you write and why?
Well, I write in I live in California. I write in a little room upstairs in my house where I have a desk and a big comfy chair. So I can be at the computer, or if I'm just in the thinking stage and the daydreaming stage, I can sit in the comfy chair with my notebook, and it's very quiet there. I look out on all the treetops and see the hummingbirds flying around the bottlebrush tree. So I feel like I'm almost like in a tree house up in that room, and that kind of has the feel of childhood to me.
Wow. Do you outline? George Martin, who of course wrote the Game of Thrones series, he says all writers are either architects or gardeners. Which are you?
I would have to say gardener, and I am a gardener, but I'm an accidental gardener. So for me, I am motivated by inspiration. So when I get that next idea for Judy, I have the seed or the kernel or the impetus, but I have no idea yet where that will take me. I like to have a bit of a map in mind. Like I don't officially write out an outline, but I like to have a sense of what the ending would be.
Right, where you're
Sometimes
headed.
it changes along the way, but I like to know where I think I'm headed so that I can try to end up there. And often, honestly, I don't even know that until I've written a draft of the book. And then I go, oh, that's what this book is about. Like, I was writing a book about Stink, where he thinks he's turning into a frog in the Freaky Frog Freakout. But I didn't know that when I was writing the first draft. I didn't even know that he was trying to learn to swim at the beginning. So sometimes this comes out of the writing process, and then of course I go back and I thread it through once I know, oh, this is really the core of the story.
So you find your way. You are a gardener. What books would you suggest to parents, and what advice would you give them to get their kids reading, particularly those reluctant readers?
Well, it's nothing new to say this, but I think we can't say it enough, which is to read aloud with your kids. I think, we have such busy lives, it's really easy to sometimes forget that. And I think it's really important that we read together as families. Many families, I think, or when the child begins to read on their own and becomes an independent reader, they stop reading aloud. And at that age, when you're still learning to read and you have that first chapter book, it can be kind of difficult to learn to read. So to me, for the real enjoyment of reading, it's still really important to sit down together and read aloud as a family. My husband and I, to this day, read aloud in the car together. We always have a book going. Even if we're just driving to the grocery store, one will drive and the other will be reading a book as we go. So I just think you're never too old for that pleasure of hearing a story read aloud.
And the natural conversations it inevitably brings up when you're in that kind of communication.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you'll read a certain line and we'll be in the car and it will just stop us, and my husband will say, read that again, read that again. We want to soak it in, or we want to talk about the characters or where we think it's going. And sometimes we take a circuitous route because we want to hear more of the story.
Go around the block a few times. I want to finish this chapter.
Exactly.
Megan,
we've been known to do that.
Megan McDonald, we could talk all day. Thank you so much for the time and for your series. Megan McDonald's Judy Moody and Stink series, all of her books are available at bookstores everywhere and online. And look for Judy Moody and the Bucket List, out later this summer on August 2nd. You can visit her website at meganmcdonald.net. And be sure to check out Storented.com, where we have reading tips and a log of so many of these author interviews. And remember, the Will Wilder Tour continues. I'll be in Birmingham, Alabama at Books A Million in Brookwood Village on Wednesday, May 11th at 6:30. You can find more information at raymondarroyo.com. And if you're looking for a fun summer read, Will Wilder and the Relic of Perilous Falls might be it.